Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is session number 13 in our study of the War of the Ring. I know nominations are rolling in for our next book. Very excited. It's kind of wide open, actually. We've had some, there have been some times when going into an election, I kind of had a good feeling for it. Like, all right, I think there's been momentum building behind this one. I think it's time. And I'm not really, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. So, we'll see how that, I have a suspicion what our next book after the next one is, right? We never do two of one author in a row. So our next one will be a non-Tolkien book. After that, I have my guesses about what's going to come next. By the way, on that subject, so there have been some confusion, I think, on the discussion board. Some people have nominated The End of the Third Age, which is the last sort of slim volume in the boxed set of the History of the Lord of the Rings set, and some have been nominating Sauron Defeated. The End of the Third Age is actually a subset of Sauron Defeated. It was the first chunk of Sauron Defeated is dedicated to the very end of the History of the Lord of the Rings. He just didn't squeeze it all into the Lord of the Rings. Christopher didn't. But in order to be able to package the box set, they extracted that bit and published it as a little thin bit. So there's no need to vote for or to nominate The End of the Third Age, that little slim book, because it's 100% contained in Sauron Defeated. So a nomination for the for The End of the Third Age is basically will be sort of taken as a nomination for Sauron Defeated, which contains not only The End of the Third Age but also the Notion Club papers, which is pretty fun. Anyway, okay. All right. So Jana, I'm not sure. I always I usually kind of stay away during the nomination process. I wouldn't want to bias the process there. So I usually don't hear about it until the votes are starting to come in for finalists. So I'm not sure. We'll have to see. All right. Nancy, it is a little bit confusing, the whole End of the Third Age thing. I get it. I can only imagine HarperCollins, kind of being frustrated with Christopher Tolkien, as obviously they wanted to be able to package buy the History of the Lord of the Rings. That's obviously going to be the best-selling subsection of the History of Middle-earth series, right? They've probably been waiting for him to get around to this bit forever, ever since he started, Book of Lost Tales. And then here he does this, and he just, includes... it's like a quarter, maybe a fifth of Sauron Defeated is the last bit. It's just, I'm sure they were a little bit frustrated with that. I don't think we're actually going to do the index volume. I'm not sure that I'm going to have too much insightful to say. A lot of people have been joking about that. That we'll do that because there is a separate volume 13 of the History of Middle-earth series is the index of the whole series. I don't think we're going to do that one. Anyway, so. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it probably will get nominated. I agree. I'm not saying it won't get nominated. I'm just saying I don't think we're actually going to go there. Anyway, all right. So one really quick and urgent announcement, and that is, tonight is May 30th, tomorrow is May 31st, and May 31st is the deadline to register for Mythmoot. So we had a bunch of registrations come in today, which is really good. I hope those keep coming in. We have over 100 people coming to Mythmoot this year. It is going to be awesome fun. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows the bell is tolling tomorrow. So anyway, so that's going to be really great. So please do remember to register. If you can't come for the whole time, you can come for part of the time. A bunch of people are registering for 1 day or 2 day. We have a 1 day package and a 2 day package for people who can't stay for the whole weekend. Though, the awesomeness goes through the whole time, obviously. But Better to have you for part of the time than none. So, that's always great too. So anyway, all right. Sorry, I see Stephen. Stephen, people have been threatening to nominate Twilight ever since we started doing this. When I first said I'll do any book that gets elected, Twilight was always the very first thing. Like, oh yeah, what happens if Twilight gets elected? And I will say again what I've been saying now for 5 years. I dare you. I would totally do it. I actually, of course, like we did Dracula, right? And my own, sort of interest in studying Dracula and my love for that book has spawned, an interesting kind of, not a hobby exactly. I'm not sort of passionate enough about it to make it a hobby, but I have an interest in vampire stories and in vampire films. Mostly, noticing how much they're not quite as good as Dracula, but anyway, I'm interested in that, and the goodness knows there are plenty of horrible things about Twilight, but we could talk about it. It wouldn't take 17 sessions, but we could talk about it. Anyway, Stephen, if it gets elected, we're watching the film. Not all the films. We'll watch the first. Of course, I'm going to make you watch the film. Look, if you guys elected, you've only yourselves to blame. Don't look at me. But no, absolutely, we'll go there. I'm telling you, we'll go there. Anyway, all right. Let us get back to the text here. We got some really fun things. Tonight's class is called On Black Wizards, Woses, and Parenting. And I'm especially excited to look at Denethor tonight. For me, Denethor was the most exciting story. There are lots of other little stories, within the development of the story here today. Of course, tonight we're talking about the Siege of Gondor chapter and the Ride of the Rohirrim chapter. We're going to focus more on the siege than we're going to focus more on the siege than we're going to focus on the Ride of the Rohirrim. But especially, as I say, I'm particularly interested in Denethor. A really amazing moment there. But anyway, let us push on through. So, Gandalf revealed. Now, there's a lot in this. This is in one of his little outlines, and of course, there are few surprises in these outlines, right? Of course, what we're seeing as we're going through, this whole kind of trip through Book 5 in the 1946 material has all been about not seeing the story, shockingly different than what we expected, as some of the early material was, but to see how and when we get to the final versions, right? By the time, he comes to the end of the drafts that we're looking at in these chapters, Book 5 is pretty close to its final form with only a couple exceptions. So I guess it's not like that there's anything in this outline that's shocking, but what's interesting, of course, is remembering back to where things came from, and things kind of look a little bit different once we get to them now, seeing the trajectory that they've taken in getting there. Sunset, a gleam far off. Gandalf says there is hope still in the west. Next day there is a council, and soon Faramir departs. Pippin has more talk with Berethil, that is, he who shall be named Beregond, and hears that Faramir has gone to Osgiliath. Time passes slowly. Ill news comes on 11th March, next day, that there is a fell captain on the enemy's side. He has won the crossings, and Faramir is driven to Ramaskoran. Still the darkness grows. It is like a slow disease, thought Pippin. Sometime on the 9th, Pippin must look out from the walls and see Nazgul, 6 or 7, flying over Pelennor, and see them pursue a few riders. But Gandalf rides out and saves them. It is Faramir, just in time. Great joy in city. Faramir sees Pippin as he comes up to the citadel and is astonished. That is, as Faramir comes up to the citadel, presumably not Pippin. Okay, several observations here. I'd be interested to hear what things really jumped out at you in reading this. One, Gandalf says there is hope still in the West, right? That's a really interesting note to be striking here, and not something that we have seen to this point. Interesting that Gandalf is making this explicit a nod towards not hope from the West, but hope in the West? Is he thinking about, like, we could still escape and go to the West? Is he suggesting, that, like, even if the Shadow conquers, well, there's always Valinor, right? Or is he suggesting that there is hope for them in their struggle with the Shadow there, because they're not forgotten about from the West? Personally, I would incline to that latter. The way that he's looking out at a gleam of light coming to them, right? The Shadow is coming over them, creeping forward like a disease, and yet the light is still shining from the West, right? And that would seem to me what Gandalf is probably talking about there. Interesting to see Gandalf pointing to that like that. The other, of course, the big thing here is Gandalf's rescue, right? His riding out to save the incoming riders from the, hey, just got a Mythmoot registration, awesome. Anyway, so his riding out to save Faramir et al. From the Nazgul, and this is interesting to me for several reasons, of course. It's not new, right? Gandalf riding forth surrounded by white light and driving the Nazgul away has been a feature of the Siege story for quite some time, but you'll remember that one of the principal features of the Siege story, ever since it became a Siege story, right, and ceased to be a conquest story, as it was at the beginning, was Gandalf not wanting to reveal himself. Remember, that's why Gandalf was standing on the wall all frustrated with the Palantir and chucking it down and braining people with it, right? Because he was trying not to reveal himself, even to the point where the defensive stance of the men of Minas Tirith was adopted, it seemed almost principally because Gandalf wouldn't reveal himself, right? I mean, he had to keep himself concealed. It wasn't even, to me, particularly obvious why he needed to conceal himself exactly. Unlike Aragorn, who, Sauron legitimately does not know who he is and the significance of him, right, until he reveals himself in the Palantir. That is, he doesn't know that the heir of Isildur still survives at all, much less that he's there, with Narso reforged and all that. That's sort of the nice shock that Aragorn has for him through the Palantir. So again, Aragorn is legitimately undercover, right? Is unknown to Sauron. Gandalf's not unknown, right? Is it unknown that Gandalf is returned, right? That he's come back from the dead, that he's now Gandalf the White, wielding the power that he is wielding? No, it can't be unknown, right? I mean, Gandalf has not been making a secret of himself. He's been going about, surely, even Saruman will have heard and reported about that, right? And besides, just like, if it's a secret, it's a pretty ill-kept secret, and the idea that, rumor or word of Gandalf the White riding through the lands and doing all the things that he's been doing, it's hard to imagine that Gandalf really thinks that Sauron's not going to have caught a whiff of this, right? And if he did, so what? It's just not, it was never obvious to me why Gandalf was so particularly concerned about this. Now, and again, even to the point where it was pivotal in their military strategy, like they could have driven the Nazgul army back sooner, not the army of Nazgul, but the army led by and overshadowed by the Nazgul. They could have driven them back sooner had Gandalf revealed himself, but he didn't. Now, Gandalf reveals himself earlier, right? This is before the advance of the army. So one thing that we can see happening simply, right, is the decoupling of Gandalf's revelation or Gandalf's sort of concealment of himself, the decoupling of that concealment from the military decisions of Minas Tirith, right? Gandalf is already helping in sort of revelatory ways, right? Showing himself and his power to the enemy. He's not being shy about that, and it doesn't change anything. I mean, I saves Faramir. I'm not saying it doesn't accomplish anything, but I'm saying it's not turning this. Not like, okay, Gandalf is uncloaked, let's ride out to victory. That's not what happens, right? That's not how it goes. Yeah. Now, Carrie, I agree. I can see it fitting in the sense of him not wanting to seek power and glory, as you suggest, or that it's not that doesn't fit him, but that's more a question of how he employs his power rather than keeping that power secret, because the emphasis really did seem to be on secrecy. In particular, secrecy to prevent Sauron from knowing that he was there or knowing the power that he had, I think. And that to me was made, I think, most clear when Gandalf looked in the Palantir and is revealed to Sauron and is like, dang it, now he knows, right? When he really didn't want to. Boomful's asking if he's waiting for until it's too late for Sauron to effectively counter him. Well, I don't know, because the counter would be, I mean, you're Sauron, right? And you know that Gandalf is the White now, and he's there in Minas Tirith. How do you counter it? What do you do, right? Send the Witch King, right? The Witch King is your counter. If you've got an anti-Gandalf weapon, it's got to be the Witch King. Well, no, hang on. First, you're gonna beef him up first, right? You're gonna like juice the Witch King, and then you're gonna send the Witch King out against Gandalf, because that's gonna be your best bet for taking down Gandalf, right? Which is what he does. So what else is he going to... I mean, he could go himself, I guess, right? Still always an option, I suppose, at the end of the day. But, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, the point is, Gandalf is no longer worried about that, right? Gandalf is revealing himself all over the place. Not only, remember, in this sortie against the Nazgul, repelling them with his white light, but even within the siege, right? When Gandalf is walking all around the city, bringing hope where despair is sort of oppressing all of the people, that's a revelation of himself too. That is, in fact, it's like almost exactly the same thing. You could say that him walking around the city and bringing hope to the soldiers is almost exactly the same thing as him riding out of the gate and having the lights surrounding him drive off the Nazgul. It's the same function. One is just more kind of immediate and dramatic, right? And the other more abstract. But both of them are sort of in the same ways. And Gandalf takes command, right? We're talking about Gandalf's army, right? How, in some of the outlines before, he just used Gandalf as shorthand for the entire army of the West, right? Gandalf goes up to the Black Gate, presumably Gandalf and the entire army, right? Gandalf was the army at that point in those outlines. And we see here Gandalf taking command of the city, right? Gandalf is in charge of the defense of Minas Tirith after Denethor, goes away, mentally speaking. But so I guess mentally and emotionally speaking, but yet it's still not Gandalf's army in the same way that it was Gandalf's army before. And Carrie, I coming back to the observation that you were making, I think that we do see that more, right? Think back to that really cocky Gandalf we got, delivering threats to Sauron at the parley at the Black Gate, right? This is not that Gandalf anymore. Gandalf has pulled back, and it's more about him being, again, sort of inspiring the people rather than, leading them from the front and taking charge. Even though he is in charge of the defense, even his command is not as commanding, I guess, as it was before. Other things from this, the march thing, right? Of course, would need to draw attention to this. This is, as I've been saying, I'm not following along with the chronological development really carefully, but of course, you may remember that these dates have all been in February up to this point, and he's now shifted it forward to March, which is, of course, the final chronology, the final calendar position of these events. Leading up to the destruction of the ring on March 25th. Now, of course, the reason for this, if you cast your mind way back to the Return of the Shadow, you may recall that he was, when they first went into Lothlorien, remember how he was mucking around with time, talking about how when you went into the Elflands, like 100 years could pass or no time at all could pass. And so he was actually contemplating them staying there for a while, but having no time, in fact, elapse while they were in there. So he wanted to, and that of course is a traditional element of fairy. He was going to apply that to Lothlorien. So his decision to say, no, time doesn't actually change, right? It's going to appear to change, but time doesn't in fact change. So they're actually going to spend an honest-to-God month in Lothlorien. That's what shifts the dates forward from February into March. Yeah. Good. And Evan, I agree. The alterations in Gandalf's role that we see from the drafts just earlier from this to these does help to make the contrast between him and Saruman far more poignant, far more pronounced. I agree. I think that's a really good observation. There was a sense, right, almost in which you could say that the Gandalf, especially the Gandalf of that, the defiant Gandalf of that outline, he was almost like living the dream, right? He was like doing what Saruman wished that he could do, just defy Sauron and take him down and show him who's boss. And you're right, the way in which Gandalf opposes Sauron this is not how Saruman would do it at all, right? And so I think that's a really interesting way to think about that distinction. Okay, and we get Faramir coming in, and of course the Fell Captain. I want to focus on the Fell Captain as this is one of the major things that gets really developed here. The role of the so there are several discoveries that Tolkien makes here in this section, things which kind of emerge from the jumble of ideas that Tolkien has had surrounding the battle here at Minas Tirith, and really kind of come into focus as he narrows in and says, this is really the thing. This is really what happens. You'll remember the significance of the Wizard King, as he still is. He's not the Witch King yet, but the Lord of the Nazgul. The significance of the Lord of the Nazgul in the battle was always there. And his being killed by Éowyn has been there. Like, Éowyn has been his bane since there's been an Éowyn, pretty much, right? That's always been her job. She was going to kill the Wizard King and die. And that's been true in every single draft that we've seen where he's talked about this. The only thing that has changed with Éowyn is that she is no longer openly at the king's side, right? She's there by the king's invitation. She seems to bring a passel of shield maidens, or at least offers a passel of shield maidens, which it seems like he accepts. Yeah, exactly. Éowyn had one job, and yes, she did do it. Yeah, exactly. So the setup for Éowyn it has been changing, right? We see her in the muster of, or the Ride of the Rohirrim chapter. We see her becoming Durnhelm. We see her carrying Merry. Merry is going openly at first. There's sort of that weird transitional, like at first they're both going openly, Merry's like, can I come? And Theoden's like, yeah, absolutely. Éowyn's like, I'm coming too. And he's like, the more the merrier, right? And then he says, apparently, we never see him in the outline say that Éowyn can't come, but we see her coming in disguise, presumably unbeknownst to the king. But Merry can still come, right? And hey, you, like, skinny dude over there, right? I don't know who you are, Éowyn in disguise, but why don't you carry the halfling? That'd be great. So we have this weird kind of moment where she's not allowed to come and she's coming in disguise. He is allowed to come and is coming openly, but nobody knows it's Éowyn that's carrying him, presumably not even him, until the end. But then, of course, we settle into the final pattern of both of them coming against orders and together. In connection. But again, at the end of the day, we're still going to the same place, right? That is, we're going to kill the Lord of the Nazgul and he's going to die, or she's going to die. As far as we've, I don't think she's lived yet. Am I misremembering this? I think that the Eowyn survival rate is still 0 so far in any of these drafts. So anyway, but getting back to the Fell Captain himself, his role has always been conceived as important, but he's kind of coming more into focus here. So the role of the Fell Captain is not a discovery in the same way as Denethor's role, as we're going to talk about in a little bit. It's not a discovery in the sense that he's foreseen this all the way along, right? This is just kind of one of those things, like it's always been an item in the outline, right? It's always been kind of a point in the checklist about the battle. And as he gets closer to it, this one figure looms larger and larger, and it's really neat. I find it really neat to see it develop. So first we have the Fell Captain. There is a Fell Captain on the... This is the ill news, right? That there is a Fell Captain on the enemy's side. He has won the crossings, and Faramir is driven to Ramas Corin. Now, the phrasing there with the Fell Captain and the fact that he's winning the crossings should remind us of the fact that Boromir won the crossings for, like the Fell Captain at the crossings of the river has been kind of a running thing, right? The Fell Captain won the crossings of the river earlier on, and Gondor drove him back, right? That, by the way, seems to be kind of... I'm trying to remember... I don't think that was in our most recent version of the Council of Elrond. I think that I don't remember. Somebody look it up for me. Go back to the Council of Elrond and the Return of the Shadow. Look at Boromir's testimony and tell me if there was any reference to the Fell Captain or the crossings of Osgiliath, that sort of story that is easy to remember from the published text. But the parallels are definitely becoming important, right? They're going to be explicitly made. That is the parallel, or the rather unfortunate for Faramir anti-parallel of Boromir reclaiming the crossings of the river at Osgiliath by his valor, and Faramir losing them, right, when the Fell Captain comes. This kind of smells to me like a parallel which works its way backwards, right? That is... Although chronologically, Faramir losing the crossings to the army and to the Fell Captain is, an echo of the earlier event. In the chronology of the writing, I think that the Faramir event might come first, and the idea of Boromir having won the crossings earlier, it seems to me like it is emerging deliberately to be an anti-parallel. Like, we're now remembering back to Boromir's valor and showing how Faramir doesn't measure up, right, compared to his brother. Boromir totally would have held the path. That's what he does, right? So putting that keep up with Big Brother pressure on Faramir there. But that for the sake of that pressure seems to be why, that earlier, that chronologically, within the story, earlier event of Boromir seizing the crossings seems to have emerged. If it had emerged earlier, then I'm wrong. But that's how it sounds. And I don't think that anything like that detailed. Because remember, back in the Council of Elrond, it was still like the land of Ond, and it was super vague. I don't even remember that Minas Tirith had emerged yet at that point. So I'd be pretty surprised if Boromir's taking of the crossings of Anduin had already occurred. But anyway. Okay. Let's keep going. More about the Fell Captain. All right. So this is a later outline. Okay, good. James says that story doesn't seem to be in the first drafts of the Council of Elrond. Good. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah. No, good. Okay. So my memory is one for one so far. It's a good record. Okay. Here's another version of the same thing, or a slightly later version. Gandalf saves Faramir. Faramir sees Pippin at Gate of Citadel and wonders. Gandalf introduces them and takes Pippin along to Denethor's council. So Pippin hears a lot, and hears Faramir accept orders to go to Osgiliath. Denethor and Faramir marvel at Gandalf's power over Nazgul. Gandalf says things are still not so bad, because the Wizard King has not yet appeared. He reveals that he is a renegade of his own order. That is, the Wizard King is a renegade of Gandalf's own order. For something or other, for many an age, he has lain in hiding or sleep while his master's power waned. But now he is grown more fell than ever. Yet it was foretold that he should be overthrown in the end by one young and gallant. But maybe that lies far in the future. He hears about Frodo and Sam. Also, how Faramir crossed from Tol Varad, the defended isle, changed to Men Falros with 3 companions and came on horse. The rest of the task force, that is presumably the rest of the Rangers of Ithilien that he had with him over there in Ithilien when he met Frodo and Sam, he had dispatched to the Pelennor Gate. Last half of chapter must deal with situation after taking of Pelennor, the Battle of Pelennor, and the fall of the gate. Okay. So I agree. Several of you are responding with various levels of shock and outrage at this question of him being a renegade of his own order. And these, all of you, in fact, Yana, Nancy, and Stephen are all pointing to the same question, right? The shocking thing about this is, in a sense, not what it tells us about the Nazgul, but what it tells us about Gandalf, right? What does this mean? Because it kind of seems like it would have to mean one of two things, right? Either A, Gandalf is still a man and not yet a Maya, right? Or the Wizard King is not a man, right? But is a Maya like Gandalf. I don't think Gandalf is still a dude. I believe we're firmly past the days when Gandalf was a man who was a professional wizard. And possibly, therefore, long-lived in some way. Remember the passage which made it into the draft, this past draft that he's been working on here, the 1946 draft. That passage in the first chapter of Book 5, the Minas Tirith chapter, when Pippin looks at Gandalf and is like, who is Gandalf? And, it occurred to him to wonder, who was Gandalf anyway? When did he come into the world? The fact that the narrator has Pippin wondering those things already, it's pretty clear. Basically, this question is just occurring to Pippin. Like, Pippin has clearly assumed for his whole life that Gandalf is a man, right? Who is wizardly, right? The professional magician. Pippin finally groks to the fact that, okay, this is not just a regular guy, right? Gandalf is, what the heck is Gandalf, right? He's not, so there's Denethor over there and he's an intimidating dude, but Gandalf is just different, right? Never thought of it before, says Pippin to himself. Anyway, so, Pippin totally groks it at that point, Arthur. Grok is a great verb. It's a wonderful verb. I love verbs that say well in one word, like a concept that would normally take you 4 or 5 words to say. But anyway, okay. It's a Heinlein word. But anyway, okay. Yeah, Yana, that is interesting. Yana says he finds it interesting that Gandalf has never been linked to Bombadil. That, it seems like an obvious kind of connection for Pippin to make. Yeah, maybe. It's not that Bombadil's totally forgotten about, but no. Yeah, that parallel is never made, Yana, until Gandalf himself makes it, right? In the whole... a stone doomed to rolling speech that he makes as they're heading back towards the Shire. But yeah, until then, I don't think anybody makes that connection. So I think that I cannot imagine, especially given the fact that passage from Pippin is in there already. Gandalf isn't a man, right? The whole resurrection thing, it's pretty. It's not like there isn't precedence. There is not a precedent for the whole resurrection thing, but this is not that, right? So yeah, I think that this does suggest that the Nazgul was something more. And there's, by the way, no real reason why he couldn't have been, apart from the whole 9, for mortal men doomed to die, and if he wasn't, then that kind of, 8 for mortal men doomed to die, plus 1 for this other dude who was a wizard and whatever. I get that. I'm not sure. This might sound strange to say, but I am not sure that Tolkien is thinking this through in that way. He, the Nazgul Lord, has been called the Wizard King before. Remember, he was called the Wizard King back in the latest version of the Bree chapters. So this is a concept that's been there for a while, that the Lord of the Nazgul has some kinds of sorcerous powers and things. And that he is, in a sense, Gandalf's opposite number, right? So that's a concept that's been kind of floating around and that Gandalf is alluding to here. So I think that what we're getting here is not, in a sense, a new development, right? This is a further development or a slight expansion on the old idea, in a sense, right? Which Tolkien had not really worked through. We never saw him really working through that explicitly and thinking about its implications. To put it to come at that a different way. When last he drafted the Bree stuff and was calling him the Wizard King at that point in his notes, Gandalf was still kind of a dude. I think that was really before the whole resurrection thing had really gone down and Gandalf had really assumed the role and position and status that he has finally gotten to. He is, Gandalf is now firmly past his high watermark, right? His high watermark was that defiant speech to Sauron when Gandalf was as high and powerful and rarefied as we'll ever see him. So Tolkien has since he called him the Wizard King, since he was Gandalf's opposite number, Gandalf has now developed, right? So Tolkien's first impulse when having Gandalf expand on and explain who is the Thel Captain, who is the Lord of the Nazgul, is to basically go back to the earlier conception. He's the Wizard King, right? So he's a wizard, and he is made explicitly a member of Gandalf's order, who rebelled. Now again, conceptually, that's fine. That works very well, right? Sauron himself is a rebel Maya, right? So, and this is exactly how it happened. In fact, already, sight unseen, I'm guessing that the Wizard King, right, the Lord of the Nazgul, was probably the greatest of all of the wizards, right? Because it's always the greatest of all of them who falls, right? So he was probably the greatest, and then he was the most arrogant and full of himself, and then he fell into evil and pride, and I'm guessing, right, that's kind of probably the backstory that's lurking behind this here, right? So again, it's not like this is a strange concept. The idea of hey, why would he have a ring of power? Well, Gandalf's going to get a ring of power. Why can't he have a ring of power, right? No, he's not. Maybe the 9 rings were designed for mortal men, but again, one was kind of, he was kind of grandfathered in on that handout, so it's all fine. Anyway, so, yeah. Yeah, good. So, again, in isolation, this seems fine. When you start thinking back to the ring verse and thinking about the whole mortal men thing, it begins to seem kind of dubious, right? And of course, it doesn't stand up either. Tolkien is gonna pitch this when he comes back to this passage. He's gonna say a different thing. This is just sort of his impulse, and again, to me, the core. When I come back to, as I keep doing, right, what is the core of this story? To me, the core of this story is that the Witch King is Gandalf's opposite number on the field, right? He is setting that up. The Lord of the Nazgul is like the anti-Gandalf, right? Here explicitly, one of his order, he's a peer of his, but he rebelled where Gandalf was true. So there you go. Yeah, good. John, thanks for bringing up, John Caldwell brings up that passage about him sleeping. He's lain in hiding or sleep while his master's power waned. I don't know what this means about what kind of evidence we can draw from this, John, about the time frame of the Third Age in Tolkien's mind at this point. I'm not really sure. Arthur, it's possible that he was like in a tomb up in the mountains, right? Yeah, you can't rule out that that's in fact where he's been. Notice what isn't there, right? Angmar. There's no Angmar. He not only is he the Wizard King and not the Witch King, he's not the Witch King of Angmar because there's no Angmar, right? The idea of the Ulairi, of the Ringwraiths still being in the world and active in the world even during Sauron's recuperative retreat, right, is clearly not present yet. And this kind of makes some sense, right? So Sauron himself is in hiding, so his lieutenants are going to lie low, makes sense. I agree, Yana. This obviously totally vindicates that passage of the Hobbit movies. Peter Jackson absolutely vindicated. You're so right about that. I'm glad that we could draw that triumphant conclusion from this passage. All right. Let's come back to it again here. All right. This is Gandalf to Pippin during that conversation with the captains there. You have met him, Peregrine, son of Paladin, though then he was far from home, veiled to your eyes, when he stalked the ring-bearer. Now he has come forth in power again, growing as his master grows. Gandalf now names him King of Angmar long ago, and this is the first appearance of the conception of the kingdom of Angmar in the texts of the Lord of the Rings. To Denethor's, or can it be that you have withdrawn because you are overmastered, causing Pippin to fear that Gandalf would be stung to sudden wrath, the wizard answers lightly, softly in The Return of the King, but our trial of strength is not come yet, he recalls a prophecy concerning the fate of the Lord of the Nazgul, different from that in the brief outline given on page 26, which reminds me to interrupt our discussion of this passage with a discussion of the prophecy, which I totally skipped in the earlier passage, being obsessed with the wizard thing. Hang on a second. It's worth actually scrolling back to that for a second. It was foretold that he should be overthrown in the end by one young and gallant. And I agree, somebody was talking about this, but it was a while ago. Let's see. I can't find it. But anyway, somebody was talking about how this prophecy casts a rather wide net, right? Not as it could be pretty much anybody, says Nancy. Right? People queuing up, right, to take a shot at the Wizard King if you just had to be young and gallant. Honestly, what that sounds like to me, it sounds. This is not Shakespearean, right? And Evan, exactly as you say, we're far from Macduff, right? it may be, as Tolkien says in his letters, that the memory of his childhood disappointment with Macbeth and how lame it was, the way in which the prophecy about Birnam Wood and Dunsinane Hill was fulfilled, is part of what inspired the March of the Ents. But it is equally clear that he did not approach this scene with that Macbeth parallel in mind. Right? Because it is nowhere evident when he's foreseeing the death of the Wizard King. Right? In fact, this sounds to me, like it's in a completely different idiom. In fact, this is not a Shakespearean prophecy. This is an Arthurian prophecy. This sounds to me like the Grail quest, really. I mean, I expect Galahad to jump up and be like, obviously, this is speaking of me. Now, obviously, again, there's no mystery about who's going to fulfill this prophecy, right? I mean, it's like the worst kept secret in these drafts, right? We know it's going to be Eowyn. So knowing who the final fulfiller of the prophecy is going to be, it's particularly fascinating to see how he's pointing to her, right? So the whole point of it here just seems to be one young and gallant, which probably lots of people are going to assume is going to be a dude. So the fact that the young and gallant person in question turns out not to be Sir Galahad or even Sir Percival or Sir Bors, but rather turns out to be Eowyn, right? The Shield Maiden. That's seems to be the thing that Tolkien's going for here, right? So the only thing that sort of thinking of that, what is the core of the story of this prophecy so far? All we get is there's a kind of a vague prophecy about how he's going to die. And the only thing that we get from this prophecy is that it's probably going to be a little bit misleading, right? That's kind of all we have from it there. But anyway, sorry, going back now to the new prophecy. And if words spoken of old come true, he is not doomed to fall before warrior or wise. Change to, he is not doomed to fall before men of war or wisdom, but in the hour of his victory, to be overthrown by one who has never slain a man. Change to, by one who has slain no living thing. Okay, so once again, right, we can see what looks like now. Just in case you weren't already assuming that the young and gallant person in mind was probably going to be masculine, right? Now the masculinity is thrown in there explicitly, right? He's not doomed to fall before men of war or wisdom. Now that's more of a puzzler, right? Well, okay, if it's not going to be, and it's interesting that men of wisdom is thrown in there, right? Because he's the Wizard King, right? So if you say he's not going to fall before, a man of war, then you could be like, oh, so it's supposed to be like a wizard's duel, right? That he's supposed to, okay, so let's trot Gandalf out there and that'll be the fulfillment of the prophecy. No, that's not going to work either, right? No man of wisdom. But neither wizard nor warrior is going to take him down. Notice though he changes warrior, right? Because of course Eowyn does kind of count as a warrior, but she's not a man of war. So there you go. But in the hour of his victory, to be overthrown by one who has never slain a man. Which still seems to cast a fairly wide net, right? Now, one thing I would say, do you know what that kind of makes me think of? In the hour of his victory, he's going to be overthrown by one who has never slain a man. Makes it sound like he's going to die by some kind of misadventure, right? The thing that I can't help but think of, which might be totally inappropriate, is actually the Old Testament story. Isn't it Abimelech and the Stone of Thebes? When Abimelech is besieging the walls of the town of Thebes, and he's, I think, victorious, right? But in the hour of his victory, a woman from on top of the wall chucks a rock down and brains him with it. and it's, embarrassing. So that's kind of what I don't know. I don't know that that's exact, but the whole, the irony of it being in his hour of victory and not by somebody who's ever killed anybody before, right? So we have a like non-professional soldier here. But fascinating that it is Abimelech Joy. Thanks. Okay, I was hoping I was remembering that correctly. But his shift of the prophecy to be one who has slain no living thing. So taking into account his revisions here, his final version here is he is doomed not to fall before men of war or wisdom, but in the hour of his victory to be overthrown by one who has slain no living thing. Okay, so not men of war or wisdom, but rather by one who has slain no living thing, and that it will happen in the hour of his victory. Okay, so we have this sort of the irony of his downfall when he is at his highest point, and it will come at the hands of, so he will not be overcome by one who is even greater, right? Okay. The slain no living thing is interesting. I don't know, Rachel, whether it like insects count, right? If you've ever swatted a mosquito, then you're disqualified for killing him. Julie's thinking the same thing. Yeah, you swat a fly and you're no longer eligible. But if you think about it, and if we exempt mosquitoes for now, Éowyn might qualify. Presumably she does, if that's how Tolkien wrote the prophecy. But if you think about it, one of the challenges actually is killing animals. Really common, right? I mean, most anybody who has cooked a meal has, broken the neck of a chicken, right? Or cut off the head of a chicken in order to prepare that meal. So like farm wives slay living things on a regular basis, right? But of course, Éowyn presumably has never cooked her own meal, right? So she's a noble woman who would not have to be butchering anything. So unless she's been hunting, which she may not have been, then, and she's not been in battle, she may well not have ever killed a living thing before. Obviously, he's not going to stick with this, right? But what do we see? Again, what is the essence of this prophecy? The essence is, on the one hand, he's going to be taken down at his highest point, but two, he's not going to be overcome by somebody else at an even higher point, right? And three, he's going to be taken out by somebody who is very counterintuitive, right? Here we seem to have this sort of the beginning of the deliberately misleading wording of the prophecy, right? Where the prophecy, the wording of the prophecy makes it sound almost impossible for anybody to be able to fulfill it, right? But notice, Evan, we're still not Macbething, right? He's still not appealing to the general shape of a Macbeth-like prophecy to get there, right? To get to this. Yeah. Well, Arthur, I don't think it means that she doesn't have to be wise at all, right? I don't think it means she has to be to have, to know nothing about weapons and to be an idiot. She has to be not a man of war, or she's not a man of wisdom. She can be as wise as she wants. She's not a man of wisdom, right? Because she's not a man, so no problem. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, so Carrie, this is tricky. Carrie's pointing out that Éowyn's joining the army is out of depression from rejection by Aragorn, not out of free-thinking feminism. That is true. But it's not true yet, remember, right? So remember the chapter that isn't yet. So far, we're up to the Siege of Gondor and the Riding of the Rohirrim. We're still missing a chapter from the book, and that is the Passing of the Grey Company. The Passing of the Grey Company has been rolled together in with... so like the Aragorn goes to the Paths of the Dead and Theoden returns, and then we get the mustering. It's all in the Mustering of Rohan chapter, right? And one of the primary elements that we're now missing, apart from the actual description of the passing of the Paths of the Dead and the tryst at the Stone of Erech, that concept is there, and the Oathbreakers finally made it into the latest version of the poem, the words of Malbith the Seer, but we don't yet have any description of that, right? It doesn't take place in it, and we also don't have the unrequited love of Éowyn for Aragorn. It's interesting. So far, they're kind of mutual, right? At the very beginning, she was totally his love interest and future wife, right? And the two of them, Aragorn and Éowyn, were destined for each other, and they were totally into it, right? Then Tolkien decides, nah, I'm not going there, and neither one of them is into it, right? So Éowyn's, which is... So actually, Carrie, you could say, right now, well... Okay, not quite anymore. When Éowyn asks Theoden to come along with him, and he says yes, that is like the high water mark of Éowyn's feminism, right? When he's like, oh, like, where should we go for help? Like, we don't have enough men. And she's like, no problem. Like, summon the shield maidens. I shall lead them into battle with you, right? And he's like, okay, let's do that, right? There you go. Like, that is the high water mark of Éowyn's feminism in the whole history of the text, right? She is not ever, like, briefly, she was supposed to be Aragorn's love interest. She was supposed to be his future wife, though even there, she was future wife in the sense not of like, I'm just kind of mooning around for Aragorn and I have no other job, but in the sense of this is a really important political alliance, and so she is the one who is his, like, the logical one for him to go on and marry because she is important, in herself and for her position with her people. So she wasn't just like an accessory of Aragorn's even then. And of course, as we've known from ever since, we've gotten this final set of outlines for the battles. As we've said, we know Aragorn and Éowyn's job is to kill the Witch King and die. So she is not just a love interest, right? She is not, Jennifer, I don't think that ever overlapped. I don't think we ever got her being intended to be his future wife and also dying in the battle, because she was his future wife very briefly, like when the very first time, like his very first go through the King of the Golden Hall, she was going to be his future wife, but they got over it really quickly, right? I mean, Aragorn and Éowyn's relationship was super brief before they decided to go their separate ways, and so by the first time we ever got towards the Battle of Pelennor Field, she was dying, right? She was going to kill the Witch King and die. So yeah, no, Ariel, I'm joking. She's never meant to be a feminist, and of course, it's inappropriate to talk in that way. To think about. C.S. Lewis said that one of the most pointless things one of the wise things that C.S. Lewis said, one of the most pointless things that a modern historian or critic can do is to ask on what side of a modern question an old writer falls when that question is never put before them, like a question that really matters to us. and just was not anywhere on the radar screen of that. I mean, it's like vocabulary that is not even relevant and wouldn't even have would have had to be explained to the person, and to ask them, so this whole question of like, is Eowyn a feminist? Like, that wasn't a thing, like not in the modern sense in the way that we talk about it. So no, I'm not actually suggesting that. I was, yeah, Booful says, so was Tolkien for or against having pineapple on pizza? Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that, right? If you really pour yourself into like getting data to try to answer that question, you're utterly wasting your time, right? That's a good, silly illustration of the kind of thing that C.S. Lewis was talking about. I mean, it's like saying, like, Boethius, was he for or against Marxism, right? I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, you can ask yourself that, but it doesn't make it a sensible question. Is Aragorn a Republican or a Democrat? Says Stephen. Yeah, exactly. That kind of thing. So yeah, to some extent, honestly, I think, is Eowyn a feminist is exactly that kind of question, really. Because it's not really a fair question to ask. What we can do, though, but what we can see, she does not exist to be a romantic accessory to men. She doesn't exist to be any kind of accessory to men. Again, there was that brief flash in the pan in which that was going to be her primary job, but she is quickly promoted to having a real job, right? Fulfilling and then notice how this whole prophecy is building around her. Right? She's there, and the prophecy, it's all about her from the beginning, right? So this whole prophecy growing up, making, as the Black Captain himself grows, the significance of her accomplishment in killing him, especially sacrificially, as far as we know, she's still going to die, makes it even greater, right? Something even more significant. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, what more we would want from her there. But anyway, okay. Let's keep going. Oh, Angmar. So we get Angmar now. Actually, I totally skipped over the first half of this slide, focusing on the prophecy now. Notice that the idea of the Witch King being Gandalf's opposite number, and possibly even overmastering him or overmatching him, Gandalf still leaves that up in the air, right? So that's still the kind of operative question. Gandalf, are you overmatched? Can you take him, Gandalf, or is he stronger than you? And Gandalf's like, who knows? The trial of our trial of strength has not come yet. So they're still scheduled to have their arm wrestling competition, but it hasn't happened yet. So that concept of the Black Captain as being the anti-Gandalf, still very central. But now we get Angmar. So what's the significance of that? Well, on the one hand, this shows that we're no longer vindicating Peter Jackson, right? We're not. We don't have any tombs of the Nazgul under the mountains anymore. But more importantly, I think we show him. This is another move. At the end of the day, this elevates him more, right? This gives him his own gig. It's still, even though he's serving Sauron and has always been serving Sauron, King of Angmar long ago, we now have an identity for him, right? Does this mean that he was King of Angmar, like that was his original, like, during his normal mortal life, he was King of Angmar? Was Angmar maybe a good kingdom, which is perverted and twisted into evil when its king receives the ring? Right? We don't know. So what King of Angmar long ago means at this point, it's hard to be sure of. But it's something, right? We get more of an identity to him. The fact that he was King of Angmar long ago does suggest that he's obviously not one of Gandalf's order anymore. So that concept seems to have already passed. But notice, Gandalf's opposite number, he still is, right? So that concept is staying, even though he's now refining how he's getting there. Okay. Mithrandir's help fails now, said some, for Gandalf had ridden down to Osgiliath at Faramir's side, but others said, nay, he has never given any, not of such a kind. He is not a captain of war. That's a news flash, right? Gandalf not being a captain of war. This is not Gandalf's army anymore. This is not Gandalf goes up to the Black Gate and, like his army with him. This is a very firm statement. We can see this seems to be an articulation of that reorientation that Tolkien has been doing in his refining of Gandalf's role, right? And again, it's not uncommon for us to see this, right? For Tolkien to articulate the changing of his ideas through the dialogue of a character, right? And then eventually he's going to take that out. He rarely leaves those things in, but very standard for us to see him articulating a new concept or changing an old concept through dialogue like this. Anyway, okay, but we'll keep going. But late that night he returned, riding with the last wains filled with wounded men. They have paid dearly for the causeway. Presumably the enemies have paid dearly for the causeway, he said, although they had prepared all things well. Presumably the enemy, has prepared all things well. They have been building barges and boats secretly in East Osgiliath to the ruin of Ithilion's trees. I love that, right? I kind of wish Gandalf still said that in the published text. He's the only wizard who really cares about trees, says Treebeard, right? And for Gandalf to look at all of the rafts and boats that they have put together in East Osgiliath, and for him to immediately say, oh, the trees. Oh, man, the trees of Ithilien have really suffered for this. It seems like a totally Gandalf thing, right? I love that. But the river is now half choked with them, that is, the barges and boats. But he has come, whom I feared. Not the Dark Lord, cried Pippin. No, he will not come except in triumph, said Gandalf. He wields others as his weapons. I speak of one whom you have met, the Wizard King, captain of those you called the Black Riders, most fell of all the servants of the Dark Tower. But he has not struck out yet, taken to winged steeds. In him I am not overmatched, and yet still I am matched, for he was a member of our order before evil took him. Oh, it comes back! Now his fury and malice are grown to the full, and men fly before him. All right, hang on a second. Let me check. Okay, no, this is before. All right. Okay, good. So I'm shifting things about here. So this is not. He's not reverting to it. He's still holding on to that idea. So this idea is not brief, right? It sticks through two versions. The member of his order thing. When he becomes the king of Angmar, that seems to have dropped down. Okay, and men fly before him. Again, now notice how his fury and malice are sort of radiating out from him like the shadow, which is causing men to run away, just as the Nazgul run from the light that's radiating out from Gandalf. Okay, let's keep moving. There Gandalf stood, and then over the hill in the flare of the fire a great black horseman came. For a moment something halted menacing, and lifted up a great something sword red to the hilt. Fear fell on all. Something or other, some more stuff. Then great rams went on before, but the steel only shook and boomed. The black captain, something or other, lifted again his hand, crying in a dreadful voice. In some forgotten tongue he spoke, crying aloud words of power and terror. Thrice the rams boomed, thrice he cried, and then suddenly the gate, as if stricken by some blast, burst probably asunder, and a great flash as of lightning burst and fell, and in rode the Lord of the Nazgul. But there, waiting still before the gate, sat Gandalf, and Shadowfax alone among the free horses of the earth did not probably quail, but stood rooted as an image of grey marble. This is the Lord of the Nazgul's high water mark, right? This is the most fell the fell captain is gonna get, right? Anything jump out at you here? What do you really notice? I couldn't help but make the crack at Gandalf's expense about knowing the words that will open a door. I was already thinking about Moria before Gandalf opens his mouth, which we're going to get to in the next slide here. But yeah, how he's facing a locked gate, and what does he do? cries out words of power and they just blast down, right? It almost makes me wonder why he even bothered with the battering ram, right? I mean, I don't know if this is like a necessary material component for his words of power and terror, but it's fairly clear that it's his words, it's his spell which shatters the gates of Minas Tirith here. Because notice the rams went on before, but the steel only shook and boomed, right? So when the ram is just beating on the gates, it's shaking the gates a little bit and it's making a booming noise. But it's not doing anything. It's obviously not on pace to shatter the gates in 3 shots, right? Whereas once the Black Captain lifts up his hand and cries in a dreadful voice, the gates are blasted, right? In a great flash as of lightning, recalling Gandalf's the blue light that comes from Gandalf's wand or staff, right? Remember Bilbo, struck by lightning, right? Which is why he says that, because that's what the blue light from Gandalf's staff looks like. So again, we see the gate blasted by what looks like a great flash of lightning. Okay. So, yes, Tara, I also like that he gives Shadowfax agency, as though he chooses to stand firm alone among all the horses. Yes, it's not just that Gandalf's will holds Shadowfax in place, right? This is not Shadowfax as accessory to Gandalf's awesomeness, right? This is Shadowfax's independent awesomeness, that he passes the test which no other free horse of the earth would pass. Even Tara, the fact that he's emphasized as being one of the free horses. He's not a slave, not even to Gandalf, right? He's not being constrained against his will. He is... Well, I was going to say he's got Gandalf's back, which is kind of an ironic thing to say about a horse that you're riding, right? He's got Gandalf on his back, really. But yeah, it's that's a big deal. Yeah, good. Okay. Let's keep going. Finish the scene. "You cannot pass," said Gandalf, which, as I said, I was already thinking about Moria before Gandalf said that. "Go back to the black abyss prepared for you, and fall into nothingness that shall come upon your master." The Black Rider laid back his hood, and something or other crown sat upon no visible head, save only for the light of his pale eyes. A deadly laughter probably rang out. "Old fool," he said, "old fool, do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse in vain. This is my hour of victory." And with that he lifted his great sword, added, and then suddenly his hand wavered and fell, and it seemed that he shrank. And changed to, "For in that very moment, away behind in some courtyard of the city, a cock crowed. Shrill and clear he crowed, recking nothing of wizardry or war, welcoming only the morning that far above the shadows of death was now coming once again. And as if in answer there came from far away another note. Horns, 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 great horns of the north wildly blowing. The riders of Rohan had come at last. Okay. This is just an awesome scene, even in draft form. A bunch of awesome things here. One thing that really is very striking is the cock crow. Notice how much more force the cock crow has. When the rooster crows, he shrinks. The Witch King shrinks, right? He lifts his great sword, and then his hand falls when he hears the rooster. He doesn't just pause, right? He is changed. He's affected by it. This, of course, is traditional. This is a traditional fairy tale, which is an old piece of fairy lore. When J.K. Rowling included that the crowing of a rooster would kill a basilisk, she wasn't making that up out of nowhere. The inimical effect that the crowing of roosters have upon magical creatures, specifically upon fairies, upon creatures of fairy, is an old fairy tale trope. And it's interesting that he appeals to this very strongly here. That when he hears that it's not just when he hears the cock crow. The cock crow changes him. He shrinks already just when that happens. And Yana, it does also occur, it has a couple different functions, right? One is that this sort of fairy tale thing, it's like a counterspell. I mean, it's what you do. I mean, it's one of the ways that you can kind of protect yourself from fairies. And remember, fairies are not friendly all the time. And you might want to, it's useful to have roosters around because you're less likely to get bothered by fairies if you've got roosters, because they're not going to want to come to your farm because they might accidentally hear a rooster, right? This is why Tom Riddle has Ginny Weasley kill all the roosters, right? Because you don't want to take any chances with that. So on the one hand, we get that element, right? It's like a counterstroke. Gandalf doesn't even have to do anything. Before Gandalf can do anything other than curse him, right? Other than say you cannot do another you cannot pass speech. But Gandalf has no chance to act, and it just happens, right? The counter spell against the Witch King happens outside of Gandalf's control when suddenly a random rooster crows in the city. But the second thing, Yana, there's a second level of irony there, right? That he says, "This is my hour," and then the rooster crows, and it's like, oh, guess your hour of victory is up, right? It was your hour of victory, but now, the way in which roosters are also like, for telling time, right? And of course, specifically, as the narrator reminds us, the point that is the beginning of the day, right? It's dawn. What is the rooster saying, right? If you could translate the rooster cry into Quenya, what would the rooster be saying? Do you think? Auta Ilome, right? Aure and Tuliva. The day has come, right? The day has come. The night is passing. That's what the that's like the rough translation of a rooster's cry, right? As the narrator prompts us there. And that's the message to the Witch King, right? Who's all like, this is my hour of victory. Oops, night's over. Day has come again. Sorry. Your hour is over. So Yana, I do think that there's a deliberate irony there. I mean, it's like a harsh irony from the Witch King's perspective, right? He's really taken down a peg, and not by Gandalf. And again, we see him being physically taken down a peg as he shrinks and drops his hand. Good. What else did I want? Oh, notice the difference in his speech, which is almost this, old fool, do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse in vain. This is my hour of victory. How does that differ from his Return of the King speech? What's the chief difference? He doesn't say, this is my hour of victory. In the Return of the King, he just says, this is my hour. Yes, Arthur, and you're right, the sequence is different. Old fool, this is my hour, die now and curse in vain. He doesn't say this is my hour of victory. Why does he say this is my hour of victory? Because it's the prophecy, right? He doesn't know the prophecy, but he's quoting the prophecy, right? And again, it's like the joke is so on him, right? And it's really amazing how we have the Witch King, which you'll notice I'm still calling him the Witch King because I can't call him the Wizard King because I can't do that. But anyway, the Witch King, right, is on the one hand set up in deliberate parallel with the Balrog, right? So just as we had the Balrog and Gandalf confronting the Balrog, so we have the Witch King and Gandalf confronting the Witch King. And like as before, Gandalf putting himself in the narrow way, right, to put himself between the horrible enemy and those whom he's protecting. So yeah, lots of parallels there with but unlike with the Balrog, right? The Balrog, first the Witch King gets paralleled with the Balrog like he's, an ancient evil of the old world, and then he's like made fun of, right? It isn't exactly like we hear his speech and laugh at him, but almost, right? Die now and curse in vain, he says, right? Which is a curse. Like, so he's like delivering a counter curse, except his curse is obviously in vain. As we see immediately, and the whole, like the way he gets completely undercut. I was about to say he gets undercut at the knees, but of course that's probably a little too on the nose when it comes to the Witch King there. But this is my hour of right. I mean, he barely gets the word victory out before he's shrinking and he's wavering and his hand falls and come on, this is it's kind of funny, right? The way in which he is undermined here. And the cock crows and the horns come, and he's just said, again, it's the final irony, right? He's just said, this is my hour of victory, which sounds like a fairly self-confident thing to say, unless you know the fact that that's exactly what the prophecy says is going to be the day he's going to die. So, he, in fact, and notice how it changes. Think about how that redefines his uttering the sentence, this is my hour of victory, how that retroactively changes the significance of what he just said. Do you not know death when you see it? Right? Yeah, but not Gandalf's death, your death, right? I do know death when I see it, and I'm looking at it right now, right? Because this is your hour of victory, and that's when you're going to die. So that's funny, but you don't know how funny it is. It's just really interesting to me that we see this is the move, this kind of undermining. Now, the undermining of the Witch King is going to get much less dramatic, right? He's not going to shrink. He's not going to drop his hand. He's not going to he's not going to directly quote the prophecy yet, right? He's going to do it later on, but knowingly, right? Even then, when he quotes the prophecy in the published text, he quotes the prophecy knowing that he's quoting the prophecy. He doesn't quote it by accident, right? So that the joke's on him. Do you not know death when you see it is not going to be made. There's not going to be dramatic irony heaped upon that sentence in the final text, right? So we're not going to be, the Witch King is not going to be the butt of the joke anymore, but it's kind of amazing to me that that's the move, right? And it doesn't make this scene less awesome, because you have to kind of think it through. Like, the first response to this scene as it's described is still like, he's terrifying, and it's really, it gives you chills, and it's awesome. But then the more you think about it, the more ironic it becomes. Anyway, all right. So there's the Witch King, but we'll get back to, we don't get the death of the Witch King yet. We'll get there soon. Next week, I think. Okay. One quick note, following up the thing we talked about a little bit before about the military position of Minas Tirith, by which I mean this sort of shift that we've been watching of how the war of Gondor has shifted from an offensive war to a defensive war. I really like how that gets focused here in this passage. The Lord drives his son too hard, and now he must do duty for the one that is dead as well. Added in ink, but in truth Faramir went at his own will, and he it was that most swayed the council of the captains. The council of the Lord had decided that with the threat from the south, their force was too weak to make any stroke of war on their own part. They must man the defences and wait. Yet ever Faramir had urged that their outer defences must not be abandoned, and the river was the one that the enemy should buy most dearly. It could not be crossed by a great host north of Menfalros because of the marshes, and away south in Lebanon it became too broad without many boats. So now he was gone again, taking such few men as Denethor would spare to strengthen the force that held the western ruins of Osgiliath. Added in ink, but hold not too long so far afield, said Denethor as he went out. Though you slay 10 times your number at the crossing, the enemy has more to spare, and your retreat will be hazardous. And do not forget that something danger in the north. Not one army only will be sent at this time from the Black Gate. And here's the Denethor that we know and love, right? The Denethor who tells his son Faramir not to risk himself needlessly, not to endanger needlessly the lives of the men of, the defenders of Minas Tirith, not to throw any lives away, and to be careful and everything. And yeah, Evan, it's kind of amazing, right, that it's Faramir, not Denethor, who wants to hold the outer defenses. This is just an act of... So notice the sort of... Both Faramir and Denethor are excellent military captains, right? Faramir, on the one hand, is right. He's like, we have these defenses. We can't just give them up, right? We have to make them pay. We have to defend the crossing of the river, at least, right? This is our best defense. We can't just abandon it and let them cross without it costing them anything, right? At the very least, we need to weaken their army at the crossing of the river. Is our best chance to do it. It's very sound strategy, right? But also Denethor's caution, though you slay 10 times your number at the crossing, the enemy has more to spare. Yeah, you can make him pay very dearly indeed to cross the Anduin. But at the end of the day, it's not really going to... If they outnumber us by so much that it's probably not going to make a big difference. So don't overextend yourself, right? It would be foolish to throw away any significant portion of our strength, even for, what would seem to be a very high cost to them. So both of them making very sound arguments. Faramir being forward into battle and wanting to do the valiant thing. The valiant and self-sacrificing thing, and Denethor being cautious, more conservative. That we've seen all the way through. Denethor has always been more cautious and conservative than Faramir, than Gandalf as well. When we have had differences in battle strategy, Denethor has always so far been on the side of caution, right, and not moving forward. But another really important thing here, and obviously we're going to get to talking about Denethor very soon now, but the other thing to really be noticed here is that business about, with the threat in the south, their force was too weak to make any stroke of war on their own part. Notice how Tolkien's kind of having it both ways here, right? They still want to wage an offensive war, right? They still want to attack, but they can't attack because of the threat in the south. Because the army of Southrons coming up the river has prevented the strength of Gondor from the south. The armies of the southern lands of Gondor have not been able to come in to reinforce the capital, so they don't have enough of an army to be able to attack on their own part, like they did in the earlier drafts, right? So notice another thing. The army coming up from the south has become much more significant, right? This is not just... It almost sounded... Remember back in the days when they were crossing a pass to come down, right, and doing the Hannibal thing? It almost sounded as if the whole point was just like, let's take the army while it's divided, right? Then we can come in and we can attack them unexpectedly before they can come and consolidate their forces in front of Minas Tirith. And then that way we can, by stealing a march on them in this way, we can take them while they're divided and overwhelm them. So it's a brilliant and aggressive offensive maneuver, which takes the army at their weakest, the enemy armies at their weakest. Now, both armies, enemy armies, have grown huge. It's not just the massive army that's coming across from Minas Morgul, which is so large that they can make them pay 10 times their number and the enemy wouldn't even notice. Now, that army from the south is also huge, right? So big that it's keeping the entire force of the southern fiefs in place so that they can't come to, and this is why. So again, Tolkien's kind of having his cake and eating it too, right? They would be offensive. They would go out there and make a stroke of war on their own, but they can't, right? They're prevented from doing this. So, yeah. Tara says that the Rumble chat has devolved into a debate on the circadian rhythm of chickens. Yeah, okay. See, there you go. There you go. Somebody has to sort out those kinds of things, right? Yeah. So, Stephen, yes, they're getting direct information on the South Runs. We still have no evidence that Denethor has any information that anybody else doesn't have. Right. I mean, apart from the fact that people are reporting to him. Yeah. Okay. All right. But let's look at Denethor. Parenting tips from Denethor. Do you wish then, said Faramir, that our places had been exchanged? Him and Boromir, of course. Yes, I wish that indeed, said Denethor. Or no. And then he shook his head, and rising suddenly laid his hand on his son's shoulder. Do not judge me harshly, my son, he said, or think that I am harsh. Love is not blind. I knew your brother also. I would wish only that he had been in your place if I were sure of one thing. And what is that, my father? That he was as strong in heart as you and as trustworthy. That taking this thing he had brought it to me and not fallen under thraldom. For Faramir and you, Mithrandir, amid all your far-flung policies, there is another way that is not yours nor Boromir's. It is one thing to take and wield this power for one's own victory. You, Mithrandir, may think what you will of me. What I think of you is at least one part of my mind that you do not seem to have read, said Gandalf. Oh, snap. That's one of my favorite Gandalf burns yet, right? Gandalf is full of these, especially in the early drafts. It's almost like, Gandalf is like one of those people with no filter, right? So like the very first thing he says is like completely snarky and unfiltered. But then as Tolkien goes back and revises, those things get taken out. Anyway, yeah, that's a really good one. Anyhow, okay. Denethor, right? Now, on the one hand, this is still a kind of, I won't call it a backhanded compliment. He doesn't unsay exactly what he says, right? He's not saying, Faramir says, do you wish that our places had been exchanged? Like, do you wish that it was me who died and Boromir who lived, right? And he's like, yes, I wish that indeed. Well, don't misunderstand, right? It's not that I totally wish that you were dead. I wish that Boromir had been in your place, if only, and then he turns it into a compliment, right? I would wish only that he had been in your place if I were sure that he was as strong in heart as you and as trustworthy, right? So I could wish that Boromir had been in your place if he had been as awesome as you, but had not done that stupid thing about letting the ring go into Mordor, right? That's really kind of he's still criticizing him, right? He's still saying, I think what you did was stupid, right? That was incredibly foolish for you, like Mithrandir, to send the ring off into Mordor. Like, that was dumb, and I totally disapprove of that move. But at the same time, I admit, like, yeah, Boromir kind of screwed the pooch too, right? So like there's a third way that's neither Faramir's way nor Boromir's way. Boromir's way was to keep the ring for himself, like that was a bad call. Faramir's was to go along with Mithrandir and send it off to Mordor. There's a middle ground, right? Which would have been. So he's not actually saying, I wish your places were exchanged. What he ends up kind of coming around to saying is, I kind of wish I had the hybrid son. Like, if I could take my two sons and roll them up into one perfect hybrid package so that we have somebody who has the the strength of heart and trustworthiness of Faramir, with the like total devotion to Minas Tirith and the, not being swayed by wizards' counsels that Boromir had, then it would have. It would have come in. So yeah, Jennifer, he does kind of come around to saying you both failed me, though he also kind of comes around to saying Boromir failed him even worse than Faramir did, right? So it's, I don't know. I guess if I'm Faramir, I'm coming to the end of this speech and trying to work it out and see if it comes to a compliment, right? But there's no question about the fact that this is much closer to a compliment than what Denethor says in the published text, right? Denethor says, or Nancy says, Denethor doesn't want to be thought harsh, so he rags on both his sons. Yeah, exactly. That's how you not be harsh. See, parenting tips from Denethor. This is very handy. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of complicated, but obviously this is eye-opening, right? You can't not, how many of you did not have your eyebrows lift when he says, or no, and rise up and put his hand on Faramir's shoulder, right? It's like, whoa, what have you, who are you and what have you done with Denethor? This is amazing to see Denethor do. He's still not changed his mind, right? It was a bad call. I still want the ring here. I'd keep it safe and everything. But notice, first, he's not harsh to Faramir, and again, still much, much less harsh. But secondly, he's also less arrogant and sort of maniacal, right? He doesn't just think of Gondor itself. He doesn't just think of, himself as the perfect caretaker of the ring. He's not. We don't see the megalomaniacal Denethor yet at all, right? Here's the thing I want to remind us of. What's Denethor's role been? What's Denethor's job in this story? Remember Denethor's first job in this story? The very first role that Denethor was designed to play back in the very, very first outline projection for the battle at Minas Tirith. Remember what Denethor's job was? Exactly, James Stevens. To kick the bucket early so that we can get on to the inheritance already, right? He was going to die super early on in the battling so that we could then have, like, do we take Boromir, his heir, who is still alive, or do we elect this, like, the new kid Aragorn, and they decide to do Aragorn, right? So he was wow, Deadwood, I was about to say. It's a little harsh. But he was in the way, right? His job was to die and get succeeded. So there you go. Ever since Boromir died and now he's been surviving, he still has kind of vanished. You remember his role when Gandalf was leading the army? He was just going to hang out they were going to leave him back in Minas Tirith. Like, you mind the fort here, right? Just you look after things at home and we'll go take care of business at the Black Gate, right? They kind of left him behind to babysit, right? In other words, Denethor's not really had a role. It's been a very unclear role. The only time he's spoken up has been to be conservative, as I said, conservative and defensive, though conservative still in generally kind of a wise fashion. He's not been foolish. He's not been timid. He's not been a coward, but he's not been as bold as some others. But he doesn't have a job, especially once, he didn't have a job when Gandalf was there, and then Aragorn shows up and he's totally out of a job, right? So what's Denethor's role? So there's been a large sense in which, even if we don't look at it from even if we try to forget everything we know about the published text, right? We just look at the text, the story as it's been unfolding so far. Denethor has still been a problem, or I won't say a problem. I'll say a question mark, right? What do we do with him? Do we need him, right? What's he going to do? So I think that I have been feeling that the Denethor question has been something that's been getting kind of more and more acute. And as we get closer to the actual battle, the need to do something with Denethor. He can't just be a cipher. He can't just be a figurehead ruler who doesn't actually do anything because Gandalf's the one who's actually in charge until Aragorn shows up, and then he's the one really in charge, right? So having him just be passively bossed around by everybody else doesn't seem like the move, right? So where is he going to go? What's he going to do? Again, in the debate on the following day, it is still Faramir who argues that, this is Christopher explaining it, of course, it is still Faramir who argues that an attempt must be made to hold the outer defenses at the line of the Anduin. But so far does the new writing go towards the actual words of the Return of the King, that when my father came to revise the passage, he had little more to do than to give the speeches to different characters. In this version, the speech made by Prince Imrahil, warning of another host that may come from Mordor, is given to Gandalf, and it is Faramir who is adamant and concludes the debate with words that afterwards became his father's. "Much must be risked in war," said Faramir, "but I will not yield the river and the fields of Pelennor unfought, unless my father commands me beyond denial." "I do not," said Denethor. "Farewell, and may your judgment prove just, at least so much that I may see you again. Farewell." Here's still plain vanilla Denethor, right? This is like milquetoast, I've got no role and no spine Denethor still, right? But yeah, Jennifer, this kind of breaks my brain too, right? Seeing these speeches that we're so familiar with in the mouths of different people, right? And in their mouths, meaning something completely different. Much must be risked in war. I will not yield the river and the fields of Pelennor unfought. When Faramir says that, I mean, wow, right? Complete transformation of that speech. This is now like the resolute words of a bold captain, right? And here's Denethor saying, "Okay, son, win one for the Gipper." So what's Tolkien going to do eventually down the road? He's just going to reallocate the speeches, pretty much, right? Change a couple things, but doesn't need to change too much. Now, just as a total side note, I feel like this should have like a do not attempt thing, under like, if you're writing a book and you're revising it and you decide that you want to completely change the trajectory of an entire conversation, keeping almost all the speeches word for word and just putting them in the mouths of different characters, unlikely to affect the change really well, right? I cannot say how much I don't recommend that you take this approach to revising your own stories. In fact, really, it's one of the things that kind of blows my mind. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll put this stuff all together in a talk. But it's something I've been kind of thinking about a lot as we've been going through the history of the Lord of the Rings in particular. People often talk about how the Lord of the Rings, if the Lord of the Rings manuscript was sent to a modern publisher, no one would ever publish it. Like no modern publisher would accept all the stuff that you get in the Lord of the Rings. They would want so much revision, and it's an interesting exercise to imagine what a modern editor would do to the Lord of the Rings if it were handed to them. But apart from the unorthodox final product, Tolkien's process, it's just really funny. He doesn't do this the right way. This is not how you're supposed to do it. I don't think anybody would recommend Tolkien's have you ever heard any creative, in like a creative writing class context? You imagine a creative writing instructor being like, okay, whatever you do, never change anything. Like if you have to cut something out, keep it so that you can use that line word for word somewhere else, right? Just whatever you do, change as little as possible in order to affect the change that you're trying to go for. I mean, mean? Like, it's an approach that seems more certain to end in like disastrous confusion and unreadable prose. It's hard to imagine advocating, and yet, of course, it's exactly what Tolkien does, and it's completely brilliant how he does it. Yeah, exactly. Nancy says, despite changing it as little as possible, make sure to do so in as many drafts as you can. Yeah, no, it's kind of amazing. But anyway, sorry, that's kind of an aside, but I couldn't help but think about that here. But of course, it does work, and it works phenomenally, right? When he does come back to this, when it's Denethor saying those things, much must be risked in war, but I will not yield the river and the fields of the Pelennor unfought. 100% different, right? Completely in the opposite direction. It is chilling. It is absolutely chilling to hear Denethor say those words to Faramir, right? Anyway, let's keep going. But he's not saying it yet, right? So how does this happen? The early conversation of Faramir and his father and motives must be altered. Tolkien finally discovers the answer, right? As we've seen happen so many times, sometimes we see these things get discovered right away. Sometimes he will, like the penny will finally drop, right? He finally sees the picture. Denethor has been this shadowy figure in the background, constantly pushed to the side, right? He's like the dude standing, the guy without a partner at the middle school dance for the whole discussion of the Battle of Pelennor Field. But now Tolkien finally, it all comes together, right? The early conversation of Faramir and his father and motives must be altered. Denethor must be harsh. He must say he did wish Boromir had been at Henethanoon, for he would have been loyal to his father and brought him the ring. Gandalf may correct this. That's a non-zero chance that Gandalf will correct this misapprehension. Faramir grieved but patient. Then Denethor must be all for holding Osgiliath like Boromir did, while Faramir and Gandalf are against it, using the arguments previously given to Denethor. At length, in submission but proudly, to please his father and show him that not only Boromir was brave, he accepts the command at Osgiliath. Men in the city do not like it. This will not only be truer to the previous situation, but will explain Denethor's breaking up when Faramir is brought back, dying, as it seems, right? Denethor has to crumble. Right, that he realizes Denethor's role is to be lost. Right, Denethor is going to be the vanquished city of Minas Tirith. Right, he's going to lose it, and this is why he's going to lose it. Right, he's going to lose it because he pushed. It's going to be the knowledge. The fact that he pushed Faramir to his own death, that he sent Faramir out, not only sent him out deliberately to try vainly, foolishly, to live up to his, brother's reputation, but did so unthanked with, the last words he ever said to him were really harsh. I mean, this is really keen psychological insight on Tolkien's part right here. I mean, I can't help but think this is let's not forget, it's 1946, right? Tolkien has had the experience of sending his sons out to war, right? And he is still in 1946 nursing one of his sons who has returned home shell-shocked and very unwell, right? So he has had not exactly this experience. I mean, he didn't send his, sons out and wasn't harsh to them as far as we know. But you can see Tolkien imagining this. I do think that, this is, notice what I'm doing. I'm appealing to Tolkien's biography, which I almost never do. But this insight, this is, the insight of this is a very parental insight here, right? Not that we're giving how-to parenting tips here yet, but clearly he is seeing the psychological picture from the point of view of a parent, right? Denethor is going to break up, right? That's what Denethor is going to do. He's going to die. The pyre of Denethor is already crackling off in the distance now, right? He has discovered what Denethor's job is going to be. This is the natural fulfillment of Denethor's character. And of course, it also makes, he hasn't said it yet, but we can see how like this conception of Denethor clicks into place, right? It fits like a puzzle piece when you finally find the right piece. Not only does it work psychologically, not only does it greatly deepen the story of Faramir, not only does it get Denethor out of the way when we need him out of the way, and also, by the way, spotlight Gandalf's role in a really productive way without Gandalf having to assert himself and take charge in a kind of dubious and uncomfortable way. But it also enables him to have Denethor be like the symbol of the Gondor that you have known, right? And the old days are passing, and the new age has come. So using Denethor and Faramir kind of generationally to sort of show that as well. Again, just everything, like boom, it completely fits. Well, I say everything, almost everything, because you'll notice what's still not there, right? And what's still not there is the Palantir. It's just his daddy issues. Okay. And Faramir lay in his chamber, wandering in fever, dying, as it was said, while his father sat beside him and heeded little the ending of the defence. It seemed to Pippin, who often watched by his side or at the door, that at last something had snapped in the proud will of Denethor, whether grief at the harsh words he spoke before Faramir rode out, or the bitter thought that whatever now should happen in the war, his line too was ending, and even the house of the stewards would fail, and a lesser house rule the last remnant of the kings of men. So it was that without word spoken or any commission from the Lord, Gandalf took command of the defence. Wherever he came, men's hearts were lifted, and the winged shadows passed from memory. Tirelessly he went from citadel to the gate, from north to south about the wall, and yet, when he had gone, the shadow seemed to close on men again, and vain it seemed to resist, to wait there for cold sword and cruel hunger. See how it all fits? See how it all comes together? Right? This is it, right? This is the answer. This not just solves all the problems. This doesn't just solve the problems, right? It's not even just about that. This brings everything beautifully up to see all those things I was just talking about. See how they're all there, right? Even the house of the stewards failing and a lesser house rule the last remnant of the king. His line too is ending, right? Again, the Gondor that you've known is gone. But also, of course, notice submerged within that, we get the dramatic irony, right? The House of Stewards might be failing, but it's not a lesser house that's going to rule the last remnant of the kings of men, right? The king is returning. He is coming. We're going to get, we can hear the distant footsteps of the eucatastrophe coming in that line, right? And it's really awesome. And Yana, exactly, this is, as we've seen so many times, and as he articulated it, it's like him discovering what really happened, right? Now he has seen the real story of Denethor, and everything works. So beautiful. Short note on Prince Imrahil, and I'll stop after this. We didn't quite get to the mustering of Rohan, so we'll get to the Wild Men and Treebeard next time, but so we didn't do Woses after all, but let's do Prince Imrahil before we go. Lastly, it is worth remarking that the importance of the Prince of Dol Amroth was enlarged as the chapter evolved. In the Draft C, Pippin did not name him among the great persons present at the council held before Faramir's return from Henneth Anun, and this remains the case in the fair copy D. The prince's intervention in the deliberations before Faramir went to Osgiliath is absent in the first version of D. Remember, the words that he will get in the published text are given to Gandalf first. It enters with the revision where he is called Dol Amroth. His bringing of Faramir to the White Tower was never added to D. That is, remember, when he's the one who's carrying the injured Faramir into the city, right? So he doesn't get that role right away. And in drafting for the latter part of D, he is not mentioned as accompanying Gandalf in his tireless perambulation of the city. The passage in which he is introduced here, with the reference to there being elvish blood in the veins of that folk, for the people of Nimrodel dwelt once in that land long ago, was in fact written into the D manuscript as an afterthought, soon after my father had passed this point. At this stage, the name Imrahil had still not emerged. So there's just a little note to say, Prince Imrahil, still not really that. He's growing, right? He's not named yet. There seem to be two elements, right? One, there seems to be a desire to have some other captain of Gondor. So far we have a council of Denethor, Gandalf, Faramir, right? So that Tolkien seems to want, or to come to want, as he's revising these scenes, somebody else, right? Some other Gondorian perspectives, because, and you can see how, like, with just those three, right, it's kind of tough, because you've got all the complicated dynamics between just those three. So having, like, I don't know, like an impartial Gondorian voice seems to be something that he kind of wants. So there needs to be some other figure there, and he doesn't yet see him clearly, right? He gets connected with Dol Amroth, but he's not even given a name. After this, we get the real birth of Imrahil's character is the elvish blood thing, right? There being elvish blood in the veins of that folk, for the people of Nimrodel dwelt once in that land long ago. That's really interesting, right? So let's watch Prince Imrahil, because you know why I find this so interesting? Notice, we haven't talked about this much. Notice whom Aragorn is not yet explicitly paralleling, right? Beren, right? Because you'll notice who doesn't exist, right? Arwen. Not yet exist. Arwen is not yet a glimmer in Elrond's eyes, right? Arwen, not part of the story. Again, Éowyn briefly auditioned for the part of future Queen of Gondor. She got a call back, but didn't get cast for the final part. And there has as yet been no casting for that part. After Éowyn, we have no glimmer of whom Aragorn might be marrying. That's not part of the story yet. So the idea that Aragorn is going to be the parallel to Beren, who is marrying the new Luthien, that we are going to get, that the return of the king is going to culminate in the third and final union of the first and second born of the children of Iluvatar. It's not there, right? Not a glimmer. Not a hint, really, that that's going to be. So Imrahil, not yet named, is half-elven, is the product of... So we're going to get the intermingling of elves and Gondorians predating the union of Aragorn with an elf. And I think that's kind of interesting, right? So that is another reason, as we kind of build up towards the advent of Arwen's character, that I find the backstory of the elvish blood of the princes of Dol Amroth to be particularly interesting. So just a little note. Let's watch for this. I'd be really interested to watch Imrahil's character grow and see how that happens. It seems to me highly non-coincidental that his character is going to start growing more and is going to get shoved back into a more prominent role. All those things that he just said that he doesn't do, right? We're going to get him speaking up in the council. We're going to get him carrying Faramir's body into Denethor when Faramir is stricken down. We're going to get him accompanying Gandalf around the city when Gandalf is raising the hopes of everybody, all of the defenders of the city, right? We're going to get him coming out and leading charges out into the battle. We're going to get him coming out and saving Eowyn's life, right? We're going to get all those things from Prince Imrahil. He's going to become a really important character. All of that stuff post-dates these rumors of elvish blood. As soon as he gets elvish blood, now, right, he becomes something. So that's kind of interesting. I really want to see how that grows. All right. Sorry we didn't get to the Woses. We'll get to the Woses next time. I didn't actually have all that many slides. I had more slides, as I said, from the first chapter than the second in our reading today. So we'll roll that into next time, and we'll do the Battle of Pelennor Field and see what happens next 2 chapters. As I recall, a little bit short anyway. So we will keep going, right? We'll keep moving forward. Should be able to stay on target next time. So
the Mythgard Academy has been offering in-depth discussions of awesome books and films since 2013, completely free to attend and free to download. If you've enjoyed our discussions and would like to help them continue, please consider donating at Signum University.